Time to start planning the ultimate race weekend for next year. Now that the 2025 calendar has dropped, secure your access early with MotoGP Premier, the exclusive ticket package provider for all races. And now, for a limited time only, you can take advantage of early bird pricing across all 2025 Apex and MotoGP VIP Village hospitality packages. All packages are paired with exclusive perks like paddock access, team garage experiences, rider meet and greets, and more across 22 tracks in 18 countries. Just head to motogp.motogppremier.com to see the full schedule and all available packages.
Hello and welcome back to the OMG MotoGP podcast for your Japanese Grand Prix review. I'm Renita Vermeulen, and of course joining me is Keith Huewen, but we're back with a fan favorite, Steve Day. Fellas, it kind of feels like deja vu, the three of us back together on a pod again.
I've never been referenced as a fan favorite before, so I'll take that. Thanks, Renita.
Well, you're a growing presence in the TNT coverage nowadays. I've got to say, we talked about it before. It's interesting as well, I have to say, watching the TNT coverage at the weekend, Rachel Stringer, she's doing a great job on the grid as well, which we know both of you guys are slightly, well, you're not new to MotoGP, really, are you? But you just haven't been at the televisual end of things, Stevie. So nowadays, we're getting all this fresh talent that's coming through, and it's looking pretty good, I've got to say, for 2025.
Yeah, I think it's nice. Rachel sort of came in and slotted in really well at the weekend. She's obviously busy doing her other things as well. So it's not easy just to come into MotoGP, at round 16 and try and catch up. So I thought she did a good job. And obviously Matt was out in Misano too as well, sort of a very familiar face to everyone in MotoGP. But I thought, given that, I think he went to Austria to do live circuit comms. But as you would expect, Matt, he sort of hit the ground running and did a really good job as well. So they've got a few people to pick from, which is good. And as you know, you need the cover sometimes. I mean, I think just about every single person in TNT has been ill at some point this year. And it's going to happen when you're traveling the world and you're on planes and you're all stuffed up and stuff like that. So, I think I think it's going to be the way forward for most teams now, is to have, a few people available for a bit of rotation from time to time.
I don't think everybody can kind of contemplate what it's like to be traveling in such close proximity to everybody. I mean, maybe you can on an aeroplane, but it's probably worth pointing out that paddocks are not perhaps the most hygienic places in the world, in as much as that you are trained to shake hands with people and fist bump and elbow bump and all the bits and bobs that we get up to. But the fact of the matter is that, it is really the great unwashed, because there just isn't time to find an available sink or washroom or anywhere where you can get. So the trick is, never touch anything with your hands. Never wipe your face. Never. Don't pick your nose after you've been in the MotoGP paddock. Otherwise, you never know what you might get.
Sound advice
all off the tee now.
No, you have to be careful. I mean, it's a place where, because you see everyone and they're all familiar, you're shaking hands, you're hugging people, you're saying hello, and it's a busy old place, and trying to stay hygiene, because it's almost like COVID's been forgotten now. I think the years after COVID, everyone was still a little bit reluctant to go in for the handshakes and the cuddles and things like that to say hello. But it's almost like, well, that was just a thing of the past. It's never going to happen again. So let's, sod hygiene. Let's just go straight in for a cuddle. And that's basically what it's like. But it is so easy to pick stuff up. And I mean, as soon as you hear, what it's like, as soon as you hear anyone with a bit of a throat or they've got a bug, you sort of take a bit of a backward stance. And it's just like, oh, all right. And it's even getting to the point, I was saying the other day to my wife, I was saying it's kind of got to the point now where you go out to dinner and you don't want to order the same thing as what somebody else has ordered, just in case one of you goes down with some food poisoning or something like that. Because if you all go for the same thing, then you're all down and then you're in real trouble.
Wow. Okay, well, there you go. Learn something new every day. Well, speaking of learning something new, I have a question for you, Steve. So I saw on your socials you were in the studio in London over the weekend, right? So how does that work? So you're working in London, but then commentating on the racing that's happening live in Japan?
Yeah, so for a couple of rounds this year, I've been working from Warner Brothers Studios in Chiswick in London. That was set up as a backup, basically, in case you lose signal. There's been a few circuits in the past where the signal's dropped. And so they wanted to test it out. But then also part of the deal for me this year was I didn't want to travel to every single event in any case. And so, yeah, it's basically from this weekend, for example, I'd be commentating, and they've worked out the time change. So you can't even notice that if you're watching it from home, and only those who know will know, is what I'm going to say. But from a sort of an average person watching, they probably won't be able to tell. There is a really minor delay, but it's so minuscule that it's very difficult to notice. It's not easy to commentate, when I'm in London and then let's say I'm with Michael or I'm with Hodgie, because you do, as Keith will tell you, you do sort of feed off body movement in the commentary box and coming in and out and knowing that, and it does make it a bit more tricky. But it from a technical perspective, it works seamlessly. So yeah, I was in London, which is good in one way because it meant I was home yesterday for a roast dinner. But bad in the other way because I had a midnight alarm call sort of 3 days on the trot. And so I was going into the studio and there's still people in the hotel drinking at the bar. And then I get back to the hotel for breakfast at 7:30. So yeah, that's the downside of it.
That interaction between commentators is really important. Like you say, Steve, I always remember working with Julian. I as you know, I go on a bit. And so Julian sometimes couldn't get a word in. So he'd either... He once tipped his coffee in my lap to shut me up or take a breath. And another time he actually stood in front of the monitor so I couldn't see anything, just so he can get a word in. Bless him.
Yeah, Jules, I worked with Jules a few times, and he was used to put his hand up when he was ready to come in and stuff like that. So yeah, little signals like that, and especially if you've worked with an individual for a long time, there's almost like this weird telepathic thing that goes on in a box. I worked with Bertie, Matt Burt, for quite a few years at Dorna, and there was this telepathy in the commentary box where I knew when he was going to come in just from maybe just the slightest movement of his body in a box, or I don't know, it's really weird to put your finger on it, but you can't replicate that when you're commentating from different parts of the world. But it's clever at the same time. It all works out, and it's not too bad. It's a bit more tricky for races. It's a lot easier to do for free practice sessions.
Right, fellas. Well, we've got a lot to get through on this pod. And Steve, I feel like I have to start this weekend or this episode talking about Pedro Acosta and what a massive step he took this weekend, securing first ever MotoGP pole. To me, it seems like he's really just gelling well with the new chassis on the RC16.
Yeah, he is. Did anyone predict that he was going to win this weekend? Just out of interest. Oh, okay. I was wondering where the curse had come from. No, to be fair, it was a good shout from Keith. He did really, really well. I thought he was tremendous in the build-up to the races. He is adapting really well to the new parts on the KTM. Obviously, he's not getting everything that Pol Espargaro has tested because they're not allowed to run any of the new engine parts. But there's been a step forward for him and for Brad, I think. You can see there's a little bit of a step there. But Pedro did brilliantly. I'm gutted for him. I really am that, he crashed in both races because he did have a genuine chance of winning. But I just think, and I'm sure Keith might agree with this. There's just, it's not. It was so minuscule what he did in both crashes. They're always on the edge, and it's a little bit of lack of experience. And also the KTM, quite frankly, just isn't as good as those Ducatis. And to run at the front of MotoGP on a KTM, you have got to be on the absolute knife edge. And that's what he was, unfortunately. But it doesn't take anything away from him, if you know what I mean. It doesn't really matter. He's not, fighting for a championship this year. He shows his speed, and he shows us all that when they do get it right, KTM, and I really do think they will, he's going to be a threat and a thorn in everyone's side. So, yeah, really gutted that he didn't get the job done, or at least just managed to finish on the podium. But that's racing.
KTM works well round Motegi. It's a stop-start type of place as well, and with a little bit in the middle. But at the end of the day, the gas, he was riding it right on the edge. I got slightly annoyed when Gavin Emmett said he crashed under pressure. I don't think he crashed under pressure at all. I think what it was he was right on the very raggedy edge to be where he was, and he was pushing that KTM harder than anybody else. Even Binder, we knew Binder was going to have a good result there. Marcus had said pre Motegi that the KTM was going to be a threat there. And it was all the way through. I mean, I think that Acosta, I'm sorry, I put the commentator's curse on him a little bit because I thought he would win his first Grand Prix last weekend, but he didn't, obviously. In contrast to that, and this is again a Motegi amplification of performance, in that the Yamaha absolutely didn't perform at all. It was the worst motorbike on the track. And it has come off the back of some very good results for Yamaha in the last few Grand Prix. So at the end of the day, I think Motegi is one of them awkward, annoying kind of racetracks. And then you put in the weather as well, cloudy, slightly damp in places and so on and so forth. I mean, I'm surprised we didn't see even more crashes than we did. Very, very tricky conditions, and typically Motegi.
Yeah, it is. It's not a rider favourite, is it, Motegi? It's very stop-start. There's only that sort of third sector really that's got any flow to it. You sort of always had a feeling in the back of your mind that it would suit Pecco and his riding style and the Ducati. I mean, let's not forget, a few years back now, Ducati used to really struggle around there, but sort of from Dovi onwards, really, from that generation when Gigi came in, they've really got it working around there. And yeah, it's a shame that KTM didn't get it working. A lot of teams struggled. I thought Honda, it's nice to see Honda with a little bit of, there's a little glimmer of hope there, I think, for them. I'm sure we'll talk about those guys at some point soon. But yeah, Yamaha really struggled, which is a shame, but I still think they're going in the right direction. For me, honestly, the biggest concern I've got right now, because I don't worry about Honda or Yamaha. They're making waves and they're trying, that they know exactly what they want to do. And some of their business decisions at the moment is pointing towards they want to make a resurgence, and they will. But Aprilia is the one that's really baffling me at the moment, because it's quite concerning, their results. I mean, they're in P nowhere a lot more regularly at the moment. And I was looking at some of the results earlier this morning, and I was trying to rack my brains of when was the last time they had a podium on a Sunday. They've had a few sprint podiums and victories over the year, and their last podium was Maverick's win in Texas. That's too long ago for a team like Aprilia, when we're talking about them being, the team that can maybe push KTM and Ducati.
Well, Maverick managed to qualify. Sorry, Renita.
No. I was just going to say it was exciting. Or qualify. Yeah, I was going to say exciting to see Maverick on the front row. But then my question is, what is it that they're missing? Is it because it's Aleix and Maverick on those bikes? And will next year having Jorge make that difference to see them a bit more consistent and up the front?
I think Maverick has proved that if the bike is right for him, then he can perform on it. And I think he said it time after time. I mean, he's just not the guy that rides through the problems like the likes of Marc Marquez, for instance. I mean, he should have been on pole at the weekend. He just touched a bit of green line, and they were a bit late in getting the notification out there, so he didn't get a chance to put another time in to regain that. So he started from 9th place. And the same thing with Jorge Martin. He screwed up qualifying. In fact, we had boring races, really, because those two had qualified so poorly to start with. And Pecco Bagnaia, again, was in that kind of full control mode. Rare you see someone that has that kind of control over a race, over his own pace. I mean, the sprint, we all thought something was wrong. He's running out of fuel or something with the way they caught him in that last lap, just because he'd rolled out of it. He knew he had 1.3 or 4 seconds lead, so he rolled right out of it. But again, in the main race on Sunday, everyone was in touch until he decided they weren't going to be. And that is just remarkable how Pecco manages to do that, make that kind of performance. He's his own man, and the Ducati worked so well. I mean, 7 of them in a row on sprint race day, all Ducatis. That's the bike for that particular racetrack. There's no doubt in it. But I think Bagnaia, 10 points now, the difference. He's closing in. Jorge's under pressure. Shame that we need them to qualify well. I mean, at the end of the day, if Marc Marquez had qualified on the front row instead of maybe Maverick Vinales, we'd have been in for a couple of corners worth of mayhem, I feel.
Yeah, I agree. I think qualifying, it was probably one of the most entertaining qualifying sessions of the season, but with the wrong results. You watched at the end and kind of sat there feeling, I think that's just affected the races for the weekend. Marc has done an amazing job this year. I think 10 or 11 times this year he's come from beyond row 2 to finish on the podium. But in modern day MotoGP against Pecco on the 24 Ducati, you need to be on those front 2 rows and ideally the front row. I thought Martin did a fair job yesterday, actually, to get himself up into second and try and apply some pressure to Pecco, but he was just imperious. And he's 8 GPs he's won this year now, compared to Martin's 3 on a Sunday, and it's those Sundays that I think are going to be the issue for Martin. I thought it was quite interesting after the race. When they had the cameras sort of behind the podium and they're getting ready to go out, and Mark sort of stuck his nose in and said, "Oh, what's the gap now? Is it 10 points? Oh, interesting." And Pecco said, "Oh, I think we should just scrap it, go straight back to 0 and just go straight to Valencia." And Jorge Martin said, "I'll take that." So Martin knows what's going on around him. And yeah, I hope it goes to the last round, but I don't know about you, Keith. I just feel like even though he's 10 points behind, Pecco's in control, if that makes sense.
Well, he is. I mean, at the end of the day, the psychological warfare has begun, hasn't it? And that it was a clear depiction of that you're talking about, that particular conversation in the cool down room. For me, the biggest problem that Marquez and Jorge had, and they had great rides really to get to where they got to. You're right. It was tyres. You'd have had to work those tyres so much harder to pull yourself through to that position. And Pecco was just riding around as smooth as you like, making sure that he's got everything in order. And when he needed it, he got it. And I think that we are so close to the edge with everything nowadays. Tyres, fuel, performance is so tight that you can't give away that amount unless you do a remarkable Marquez and ride around the outside or underneath everybody in turn one. From that far back, you are already hamstrung with a performance. But you're right about what you just said. Bagnaia is now a sprint race. He's now king of the sprints, not Jorge Martin, because he's won 6 of them and Jorge's won 5. But looking at the sheets, Jorge's 10 points in front. But when you actually look down there, his continual points gathering has been absolutely brilliant through the year, even though he's won miles less main Grand Prix and now less sprints than the man in second place, Bagnaia.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's only because of Bagnaia's, I think, 7 crashes throughout the season that's really meant that he's playing catch up, because Martin has been really consistent. But the problem is, I think it's 11 races. 11 of the weekends, at least one of them has made a big blunder. And you feel like there's probably another to come before the end of the season. Where that is, I don't know. I mean, we're going to Phillip Island next, which is a ride around fan favourite. You cannot really go into that and properly predict what's going to happen, because it does level out the playing field. Everyone probably could get involved in that. I certainly hope so. But you don't go into that sort of with necessarily a strong Pecco feeling, but you do for Thailand and you do for Malaysia. It's just funny how the championship has gone, really. I just feel like Pecco is just got that extra and ultra control. I mean, as you've probably seen, there's only a few riders that after 16 races have picked up 8 wins in a year. He's joined an elite club there of absolute legends. And I do think after his career's finished, we will look back at Pecco as one of those legends. We just almost not believe in it right now. I don't know if it's because he sort of doesn't tend to celebrate as much and he's quite a normal guy. He just sort of keeps himself to himself. What I found really interesting in that race, I felt like he was quite cute in the latter stages of that race. He would have seen his pit board and his dash that Martin was 1.5 behind, and then it was 1.5, 1.5. And I wouldn't put it past Pecco to think, do you know what? I'm going to roll it back a bit here just for a couple of laps and almost tempt Jorge into thinking there's a race on here and see if we can push him into a mistake, because he slowed his pace right down. Jorge then pushed his pace up again, and then Pecco, it got to about 8 tenths and Pecco went, yeah, all right. And then went again. So I don't know whether that was just him taking a breather or whether he was just trying to invite Jorge into a mistake, but he's such a clever rider. And at the moment, when he gets out there and he's in that mood, he's impossible to beat.
148 points still on the table. Long way to go.
Yeah, still anything can happen. And honestly, I feel like Pecco probably will win, but I think you could play out the last 4 rounds of the season every day and you'll come out with different results. I think, the championship has swung so much this year. anything is possible. Anything is possible.
Have you ever wanted to explore a team box or snap a selfie with your favourite rider? Well, now's your chance. MotoGP Premier is partnering with Pramac, Gresini, VR46, GazGaz Tech 3 and LCR Honda this season, and with a Chicane or Apex ticket package, you'll enter a garage, see the team's preparations during a Grand Prix weekend, and even enjoy a meet and greet with riders such as current championship leader Jorge Martin, 6-time MotoGP champion Marc Marquez, or rookie sensation Pedro Acosta. Experience a Grand Prix like an insider, only with MotoGP Premier.
I don't know about you both, but when I saw the rain flags come out during the MotoGP race early on, my first thought was Jorge Martin is literally just going to follow Pecco with whatever he decides to happen. And obviously, like, we saw that happen in the end, where it obviously just followed and nothing ended up happening from it. I'm rambling here, so let me get to my point, Renita. But do you think that Jorge Martin is now starting to almost observe Pecco a little bit differently rather than trying to run away with it? I'm going to follow and see what you're doing a little bit more rather than specifically just with the wets?
He's definitely matured. There's no doubt about that in the last year. So I wouldn't say that is an outrageous thing to say, even though it doesn't fit well with the Jorge Martin resume of the past.
No, I agree. It's tough to say. I think he's desperate not to make any mistakes. I think that was clear. He had to do a lot of work, and he had to be quite brave in the opening laps of that race. You know, when you're 11th on the grid, you've got work to do to get up to Pecco. And I think because of recent mistakes that he has made, it must have been playing on his mind, thinking, do you know what? From 11th on the grid, if I'm only going to lose 5 points here to Pecco, then so be it. I'll have a go if he makes a mistake, but he's not going to make a mistake. And I think Jorge is mature enough now to know the only way I'm going to get past Pecco here is if I take risks, is if I gamble a little bit more. But that you could already see the front end is so heavy on the brakes around Motegi. You could see how much they were both pushing just to do the pace that they were doing. And I just think, could Jorge have done anything about it? Yeah, he could have had a go. Would he have crashed? Probably. If he'd have tried to push and get any closer to Jorge, to Pecco. So I think they're both very smart young lads, and they're both trying to outsmart each other. But I think Jorge is well aware of what Pecco can do and the damage he can do on a Sunday. And so, I mean, I would imagine he'll be looking forward to Australia. It's such a different circuit. I don't know about you, Keith, but I kind of feel like at somewhere like Phillip Island, Martin maybe just has the edge over Pecco there. It's just the nature of the beast in Jorge Martin matched up with Phillip Island circuit.
Yeah, the trouble is with Phillip Island, you can never really tell with the weather. It depends. Again, it's going to be a qualifying situation, although it's not critical, perhaps as critical at Phillip Island. But I think that it is important to qualify well. There's so many things going on at the moment in the background that are going to make a difference. And I think Phillip Island, again, is one of them racetracks. Marc Marquez, he might be on a GP23, but round there, left-hand track, the old flat track strategy is going to come into it a little bit as well. I think Marc Marquez, again, when we get to predict him, which won't be till Thursday, will it, Renita? Don't make us do it now. It will be... I'm going to have Marquez right at the top of the tree, I think, for Phillip Island this coming weekend. It's going to be, it'll be interesting to see as well. There's so many changes going on at the moment. We talked about Yamaha very briefly, how they fell apart really at I know that Remy was a stand-in as well for the weekend, but the Yamaha didn't improve. And then we've had, Honda have taken on the Yamaha attitude to some extent with their new hiring. Romano Albesiano is leaving Aprilia. He was a top man at Aprilia, and back in the day, I mean, he was an aero man as well, and Aprilia's aero has come on hugely. So I wonder how much of that has been an Albesiano bloody project, if you like. He's going to Honda, which again, Honda hiring someone from out of their group goes to show what their commitment is into the coming years. I mean. Yeah, it's a strange situation. I mean, Ken Kouelchi, I think, was the old Suzuki guy, was their technical director, and he's moving over, and Albesiano comes in. he's been at Aprilia for years as well. I can't remember. I think he took over Albesiano from the Gigi Dall'Igna days. So getting back to what you were saying earlier on about the Aprilia, that's another negative, it seems, in that situation for them moving into 2025. I mean, Aprilia have got to pick up the pace on so many fronts at the moment. So we'll see what their hiring is likely to do. I don't remember all of this turnover of top staff. The last time, I think, was when KTM joined the grid some time ago now. You remember they hired everybody. They cherry-picked as many people as they could at top money. There was a lot of people from Honda that ended up moving across to KTM back in the day. Maybe we're seeing the problem at Honda because of the top guys that moved away from Honda back when KTM came in. Maybe that was the start of a problem that they had in performance level. So there's a lot of churn at the moment and a lot of interest going on around the paddock.
Yeah, there is. I think that Romano Albesiano move is really interesting. I didn't see that coming at all. I didn't have any whisper of it happening. Romano Albesiano is kind of a part of the furniture in Aprilia, and I think he was even there even when Gigi was back there as well, and he's very much a technical man. He was labelled team manager a few years ago and hated it because he doesn't want anything to do with the team management side. He doesn't really want much to do with the media. He's a technical boff, and that is, he's done a really good job. He is, and Rivola, of course, are part of the reason why Aprilia have had this rise. And I think it's a clever move from Honda to have someone like Albesiano in there. He's a no-nonsense character. Matching up with Alberto Puig, that'll be a fun dinner table, won't it? But they want it. I think it's a clear sign that Honda want to move. They want to move forward. And it is really interesting because once upon a time, Keith, there would be absolutely no way that Yamaha and Honda would look to appoint people from Aprilia or from, and not look within. So it is definitely a changing of the guard there. And I can't remember a time where top brass have moved around and it's been musical chairs like it has been the last couple of years.
You imagine being at Motegi this week. You've got the top brass from Honda, as they always are. It's Honda's track. The Honda Museum is in the grounds. It's a fantastic place if you've never been and you intend going. You've got to spend a whole day in the museum to even scratch the surface of what's in there. But all the top brass were there. So these kind of announcements, Taka's last home Grand Prix as well, Takagami, the last one for him. Zarco took him out in the sprint race and got himself a long lap penalty. So the two LCR men on the deck. It wasn't really an auspicious ending to Taka's life in MotoGP, really, was it?
No, it wasn't. I felt sorry for Taka. Do you know what? I think he's an underrated rider as well. A couple of years ago, during the COVID times, when he was up at the front end and he just missed out on a podium. He's got some great speed. When he won his Moto2 races, if you look at who he beat on his day, there's some big names there. He's a fast rider, but the Honda isn't, showing it. Well, it's unfortunately just nowhere near competitive enough. And unfortunately, Taka's results have fallen by the wayside as a result. I reckon he could have got a contract in World Superbikes a few years ago and ruffled a few feathers over there. But what he will do, I think he'll be a brilliant test rider for Honda because he's still got the speed. He's, cut him in half. He's Honda. And as we said a couple of weeks ago, you want fast guys testing your bikes. You want guys who know what it's like to do race simulations, who can give you all of the information. And he's gone through all of these different eras of Honda with the Marks and the Cals. So I think he's going to be a really good appointment as a test rider for Honda. And then they've got Aleix Espargaro as well. So, they're doing all the right things. They're making all the right noises.
Time will tell.
Think it's what Honda need, though, having that Japanese test rider to help bridge the gap between the European and the Japanese side?
Not necessarily. I don't think it has to be a Japanese rider. I just think that it just so happens that Taka, it's time for him to move aside. He's had enough bites of the cherry in MotoGP. It's time to let Somkiat Chantra come through and have a go. But I think that he's committed and loyal to the cause. And if you're Honda and you're thinking, okay, we don't just want one fast test rider, we want two. And Taka Nakagami's sitting right in front of you. I think it's a bonus that he's Japanese, of course. He'll be able to test things in Japan as well as Aleix testing things in Europe, he'll be able to do the odd wild card as well. I just think it makes sense. It would have almost been a bit odd had they not.
Worth picking up on that, Steve, if I may. Albesiano, obviously, is going to be moving to Japan. That is a cultural mix that could make a lot of difference. I would imagine that he's going to be moving to Japan in the situation. And maybe not. Maybe he'll be working remotely from Italy. But at the end of the day, that too is a big bridge to gap from a personal point of view. And we know how difficult it is when you spend, half your life away, let alone all your life away.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know the situation there, to be honest. I guess we'll try and... I think it was such a bombshell, that announcement, that there was no interviews set up for him over the course of the weekend. I don't think he's spoken to any media outlet at all. I'm pretty sure he will be in Australia and Thailand, and it will be interesting to find out whether or not that is a big move to Japan. Like you say, that's a massive cultural shock for him, or whether, with Albesiano coming in and Aleix being the test rider, whether they're kind of following Yamaha's route a little, and so they'll stick, maybe they'll have a European base as well as the Japanese base, and sort of focus with Taka in Japan and Romano and Aleix in Europe. I don't know, but it's a good point. I guess we'll find out. But yeah, I just think that was such a... In MotoGP at the moment, there is very rarely is there a move that's made or an announcement that's made and someone hasn't got wind of it somewhere. And that one, when it came up on the screen, I genuinely like, what? There hasn't even been a murmuring regarding that. So they've done well to keep that quiet. And I think it's a really astute signing from Honda. And again, worrying for Aprilia. Really worrying. Because they are in a bit of a patch at the moment. And one presumes Massimo Rivola is going to have to find someone to replace Albesiano now pretty quickly.
Well, Honda had that weekend go from bad to worse, I guess, with Joan Mir and Alex Marquez colliding early on in Sunday's race. And just bizarre that Alex's Ducati basically attached itself to Joan's Honda. And super lucky that obviously no one got hurt with that. But my question to you guys, or Keith, you can answer first if you want. Did Alex deserve the penalty for this?
Well, he caused it at the end of the day. He got himself snagged on the inside and just tagged the rear end. I think that there's fairly clear. That's one of the rules that's quite clear in the old book. From a steward's point of view, if you have caused an accident and taken the other rider off, then you generally get a penalty for it. He's mad as hell about it. He doesn't agree with it at all. But then again, find me a rider that agrees with a penalty, and I'll tell you he's retiring.
Yeah, I agree with Keith completely. I think it's one of those, it wasn't malicious. Clearly, he didn't mean to do it. He didn't want to be there. That's the last place he wanted to be. It's a fast part of the circuit to go down as well. It was unfortunate for Joan, who can't get a break at the moment. But the rules state, if you cause an accident, then you're going to get a penalty. So I think he's just going to have to take it on the chin. I didn't look at it and think, they're going to have to throw the book at Alex for that. It wasn't one of those incidents, but unfortunately it was one of those where you go, you're probably going to get a penalty for that.
Penalties are such a pain, but they're a modern day thing. I mean, we've got to have them, I'm afraid, with the way that racing is nowadays. We're talking, to 3 digital places, it should be 4 digital places. How many times do we have equal timings to 3 digital places now? I can see them going an extra. Back in the day, it was to 1/10. Then we went to hundredths and thought we were right on the game. Now it's thousands. Well, it's going to be 10,000 soon. There is no doubt in my mind about that. That's what they're going to have to go to. It's that close. And to emphasise that, of course, a rule. I forgive me. I mean, I don't read the rule book quite as religiously as I perhaps used to. But the penalty that Marc Marquez should have had on the final lap for being on the green when he shouldn't have been on the green, but because they deem that if you're not within a half a second of a rider, it's not considered close enough to give you a time penalty. And because he was 0.36 of a second, 36 thousandths of a second further in front, he didn't get a penalty for it. I mean, I wasn't aware there was that discretion. I always thought that if you touched the green or over the limit and triggered the sensors, you were to give up a place. But apparently not. Were you aware of that, Steve? I
no,
certainly
wasn't. I wasn't aware of it at all. The green paint thing is a bit of a bugbearer because I get why it's there. And if it was grass, they probably would go near it. I understand that. But at the same time, where they put the green paint is in some places exactly where you expect a rider to exit. You know, riders are using all of the circuit. They're using the curbs. And I do think, you know, when you're watching an amazing lap and you think, well, actually, this particular moment where he's clipped the green here wouldn't have made any bloody difference at all. I don't think it's fair that they get a penalty. I get it's there, and I get that there has to be a line where you have to cross it. So, you know, you have to draw the line somewhere. But there are certain places where this green paint malarkey really does bother me. I'm not going to lie. So yeah, I wasn't aware of that particular rule. No.
That closeness, I mean, you get it at Misano as you come out onto the last corner at Misano corner as it's called. And there's a little green triangle that catches them out, usually in qualifying more than anything. It's just basically the natural drift for a motorbike to go. It's like they haven't extended the curbs far enough along. I always liken it to a bloody policeman with a speed camera behind a hedge. You know, it's hidden there waiting to get you. And it's bloody annoying. And the times I've argued with my co-commentator, I remember having quite a long heated discussion with, again, Gavin Emmett, over it. He was on the rules are rules thing, and I was on the rider outrage thing. So the pair of us didn't really meet in the middle on that one. But it literally is like it's like almost trickery for no good reason. Just paint it bloody white and let's get on with it.
I think if you go into, there are certain parts of circuits where the green paint genuinely needs to be there because riders will, and as you well know, they will take everything that they can get. And I think that like there are certain chicanes where riders take a lot of inside curb, and I'm in full agreement that green paints in some chicanes have to be there, but it's on the exit of curbs, like you just mentioned, the exit of the final turn in Misano, and where Marquez clipped the green paint, you know, in qualifying for his lap to go away. I mean, would it have made any difference at all? You know, of course it wouldn't. But what it did do is, you know, it robbed Mark of being on pole position. And then the worst thing is that he wasn't even notified, so it didn't even trigger anything initially. So he was cruising around for 2 laps thinking he was on pole. Then he got told he was bumped back and didn't have time to react to it. I didn't like that. But there we are.
I was going to ask you guys that. Do you think that's fair that he had that taken when they couldn't notify him because of a glitch or whatever reason they said?
They had to do something about it because the problem is that if they'd have, you know, they can't just let him have the pole position because there'd be absolute outrage from the rest of the teams and other riders. But what I don't understand is why did that not trigger immediately? Why was that lap not cancelled immediately? I think he can feel hard done by, but you know, ultimately,
I don't think it triggered. Steve, I don't think it triggered the electronic side of things. I think they were relying on track cameras and the like in the end to make the decision. That's why it was a later thing that came. And in that circumstance, I mean, he was damned. Never mind, he gave us a race, and it's quite funny. At the end of the day, because he's always in the main part of the race. I mean, we'll get slaughtered in the comments department here because there are a couple of anti-Marquez people that always write into us at OMG. But I love what he had to say. He called it, from his own words, it was a super boring race. I did like that.
Well, he's not wrong. It's not one that's going to live long in the memory, to be honest, is it? It was far from a classic. But, you know, Pecco, when he rides brilliantly, you know, the races can kind of go like that. I mean, you just have to take your hat off to him and just say that he's so, at times, he's flawless. And that can lead to, you know, slightly boring races. And at the moment, the Ducati 24 is clearly just a step above everything else at the moment.
There was that little bit of unknown, though, with I didn't put a lot of mileage on the old medium tyre, so they weren't too sure how the medium was going to react over the full race distance. And we had a little bit of extra temperature on the day as well from the day before, so it was the track was a little warmer. It's a funny old track, Motegi, because it don't look that grippy, but it's grippy in the wet. It's grippy in, you know, it's a grippy racetrack at the end of the day. And so sometimes that is slightly confusing.
It's a weird place, Motegi, because as you know, you go there and it can be really dull and grey in the skies, and you could think it's going to rain at any second, but it's absolutely boiling, really humid, lots of grip. And then you can look at it and you can see shadows on the circuit and the sunshine, and you can and it's raining over in Sector 4. It is just one of those places, like many circuits that are sort of buried in the hills. You are going to get that from time to time. One other thing, I just remembered as well. And Pecco's not lucky. He's a brilliant rider, but he did get away with one in qualifying because he went out and he obviously had some sort of dodgy tyre and he wasn't putting the laps in and the rain spots were coming down and he had to come into pit lane. If it had dumped it down then, he would have been way back on the grid himself. I'm not saying, you make your own luck in MotoGP, but that worked out for him because that was very nearly a major issue for Pecco. But as soon as he got on the front row, you kind of knew what was going to happen with Jorge back in 11th on the grid, Mark 9th on the grid. I didn't really have a mega strong feeling for Bastianini over the weekend. I just don't know why, but it didn't. There was nothing on Sunday that I went into thinking, other than Pedro, thinking, we're going to have a proper race in our hands here. I was just hoping Pedro might be the one that sort of dished it up a little bit to Pecco, but it didn't happen. Never mind.
Before we move on to the other classes, did you guys see those photos that Gareth Harford posted of the vortices coming off Jack Miller's aero? I thought that was just incredible.
Yeah, I posted that back on my Twitter feed because vortices, really, if you're getting vortices off these things nowadays, and that underlines what you're saying, Steve. The air, the atmosphere, the humidity, and the light that you get there create that kind of thing. The density of the air is such that you're getting vortices off of the motorcycle. It also clearly from that, it wasn't the vortices look fairly pretty, but we've got aero at the end of the day, so you're going to have them, even though we can't see them. And of course, that's what interferes with all the riders around them when you've got aero about. It's what moving you all over the place. But I thought also from that very same picture was the amount of heat that was coming off that motorbike. You could see it boiling off of the bike, and that's what makes the difference with tyres at the end of the day. That's what creates our issues as it is at the moment with the front Michelin. If you're in a pack and you're in the middle of that, that's what is heating up your front tyre and giving you that ballooning. And why they set tyre pressures to either suit running on your own or suit running in a pack. And if you get it wrong, you're in trouble with the data guys, unless, of course, you've got a leaky rim.
Yeah, I saw it. It looks cool. I'm not going to lie. It looked really cool. But at the same time, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking it's too much like Formula One. I think we've spoken before about it. I'm a fan of getting rid of most of the aero, the ride height devices. The changes couldn't come quick enough as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, cool for pictures. Gareth is a bloody good snapper as well. So kudos to Gareth. So yeah, looked great, but ultimately I think it just shows you how much of an impact aero actually has at the moment in MotoGP.
Sorry, guys, before we move on, I was just thinking about Jack Miller, that super slow-mo of, I think it was turn 11 in maybe Q1, where he had all that chatter. I guess my question is, how much is this just affecting Jack Miller compared to Brad and Pedro?
They've all got it. I mean, chatter, that absolute chatter, anybody that's listening to this will wonder what the hell chatter is other than what we're doing at the moment. It's when the bike is absolutely moving in a frequency that you just can't keep control of from a damping point of view, from a suspension point of view. You've heard of chatter at the front end, chatter at the rear end. Moving weight around can eliminate it to some extent, changing, different frequencies that you might be able to control through damping, through oil or spring ratings and so on. But it is a nightmare if you've got it, especially if you've got it somewhere like Motegi, which is not particularly ripply. Sometimes you get chatter on a racetrack that's got a surface on it that's slightly uneven that will give you that suspension frequency that is causing a problem, and you can dial it out. But if you've got it, it's inherent, which does seem to be a bit of a KTM thing, I seem to remember. But Ducati had it as well, I think a couple of seasons ago. I think when we went to the way things are now, with the amount of aero on there, it does create a problem, but they've got different ways of dialing it out. We had the good old Ducati lunchbox, didn't we, at the back of the seat to try and, whatever. We never knew what was in the lunchbox. We can pretty much guess it wasn't sandwiches, but it would have been a mass damper of some kind to try and take some of that chatter out of the way the bike is. So if the frequency of chatter is too much, it means you're losing grip effectively, and that from a bike racing point of view is a nightmare.
Yeah, and the thing is with KTM as well is they are, do you know what, they're not going slow. If you took Ducatis out of the equation altogether, KTMs are going faster than last year. They're on the brink of all of the lap records, and so they are doing a good job. They are making steps, but the problem is that Ducati just make even bigger strides, and they're trying to keep up with them, and they can't. They're just not. They're not there, and therefore the riders are then having to push that bit harder to get up with them. And I just think I feel sorry for anyone that watches MotoGP at the moment and just thinks, Pecco and Jorge are just clearly a cut above the rest. Listen, they are amazing riders, and at the moment they are two of the best riders in the world. That is not in question, but the rest of the field ain't slow. There's a lot of riders that are capable on the same machinery on a 24 Ducati of really mixing it at the front. So I feel a bit sorry for the KTM lot at the moment because they've got some damn good riders at their disposal, but it's just not happening for them at the moment. And as Keith will tell you, if you've got front end chatter, especially around somewhere like Motegi, you're not coming out of the weekend sunny side up.
Well, you saw the way Binder was having to ride it. He forms a V in a circled corner. I mean, he'll just run in as hard as he can, get it turned.
He's brilliant to watch.
Yeah, he is spectacular. There's no doubt about it. But that's the way he's having to ride his particular KTM to make that work. And yet you've got Acosta, and I think this is the key with KTM. Unlike the Ducati, which only used to suit a certain style, I think the KTM has been slightly broader in its needs from a rider. I think you got Acosta riding what is a KTM, even though it's called a Gas. He rides it completely different to the way Binder rides it. Jack is somewhere in between. And it's interesting that the combination of riders you've got and the different styles, and all of that is feedback for KTM. So I don't think they've lost their way. I think they've just not had the time to move it forwards. And I think come 2025, they will do. But really then everyone's looking to 2026 and 2027 when we got rule changes. So tricky times ahead for these teams and big money. I think that's the issue as well. The amount of money that clearly is now being spent by Yamaha, by Honda. We've seen all of these. They must have increased budgets from particularly the Japanese manufacturers who have concessions as well, which means they can make that work for them over the next year too. And it's whether they've got to make two steps where everyone else makes just one at the moment to be back in the mix. It's going to be a very interesting year next year.
Yeah, it is. And I think for KTM, obviously they've got two new riders coming into the team as well with different riding styles and different ways of racing as well. You've got Maverick, who needs all the stars to align and needs a bike to be running perfectly to go. And so he's going to be really hard on Tech 3 and KTM to try and find that balance. You've got a guy who can make tyres last unbelievably well and has got terrific late pace. And then obviously you've still got Sunday man Brad Binder, who will ride a wheelbarrow around anywhere fast if you give him it. And then, the super prospect of Pedro. So they're going to have four completely different riders, but all capable of winning races on their day. So I think that's a bonus. And again, when you look at all the rest of the manufacturers, they've all got a good mix of riders for next year, to try and do the job. We've got a few new rookies. Obviously, Yamaha have got the experience now of Jack and Miguel coming in, and my God, do they need that. So, yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting next year, and fingers crossed that the rest of them can just catch up to Ducati a little bit and give us some hope.
Right, guys, we've waffled on a lot about MotoGP. Let's move on to Moto2. And interesting as it was such a shame that rain didn't hang on and just come like an hour later, because I feel like that would have made the MotoGP race so much more exciting if we hadn't started off on a wet track.
Well, the situation with the Moto2 race at the end of the day was a tyre gamble, wasn't it? I mean, those that went out on wet tyres must have realised within a lap that they were going to be struggling towards the end of it. It got shortened, obviously, to 12 laps in the end, which was a bit of a shame as well, because it became a bit of a sprint race. But Manuel Gonzalez winning his first race, I mean, like, big deal for him. I mean, I've got to say that's to win your first race. It was a brilliant ride as well. Jake Dixon led from pole for the first little while, again, giving us Brits a bit of hope. Let's see Jakey boy, but he was on wets. and they just didn't work late on in the race. Those that were on slicks that made that choice really did the business.
Yeah, I was surprised. Do you know what? I'm going to find out when we get to Australia, but I was very surprised that Jake didn't gamble for slicks. He's the type of rider that would, and I'm intrigued to know whether or not he said, I want to go on slicks, and whether someone in the team maybe said, look, we need to go for wets. The majority of the grid are going to be on wets, because that just felt like the type of race that would suit Jake, at sort of drying but slightly damp circuit on slicks.
I thought it was pretty ballsy of Iogura, because at the end of the day, Ogura was the man that really, he needed to protect his championship lead and all the rest of it, which he probably would have said, I'll look across the grid. If everyone's on wets, I'll settle for that. But six riders went for slicks, all-round slicks, and they were the ones at the end that did the business. There's no doubt about it. But Ogura, perfect choice really for him.
Yeah, that was a big gamble. I honestly thought that was a big gamble to take, especially with the championship lead that he had.
You don't think he knows anything about the track?
Well, yeah. I mean, he had that experience, and also they were drawing on their experience from Assen as well, where we had a little bit of rain there, and I had come back in and said that in low grip and with spots of rain, these Pirelli slicks are actually really, really good. I mean, it was unbelievable watching him out on the curbs in the early laps. I was like, what are you doing? But he looked more stable than those who had wets on.
He did.
It was, incredible, really, and ultimately the right decision. It was a gamble, to be honest with you. You couldn't blame anyone for making any decision down on the grid. Those that went for wets, you felt sorry for them in a way, because they obviously thought it was going to be the right choice for them, but it didn't pan out. And Ogura now has got such a commanding position in the championship. He won't be stopped. He's just, his momentum. The thing is, you mentioned Gonzalez, and it was great for Gonzalez to win. It's a 9th different winner this year. That's the first time that's happened since 2010, when Moto2 first came in. But every single one of Ogura's opponents, if you like, in the championship, keep on sort of not wiping each other out literally, but wiping themselves out of the equation. They can't put a run together, and somehow Sergio Garcia is still second in the championship. He scored 8 points in the last 6 races. He's got no form whatsoever, bless him. So for me, this is a closed book. You might as well just give the title to Ogura now. And yesterday's performance just sort of solidified that, really. It was a really bold choice to go for slicks in his position in the championship, but it paid off. He took some big gambles in the race as well, and he who dares wins ultimately. So,
and he's going to go to Trackhouse MotoGP next year as looking like Moto2 champion. There's no doubt about it. Do you know that the highlight of the day for me was seeing the Giracato's son, Iko, waving the checkered flag in the Moto2 race. I mean, the Giracato, for those that we've just come from Misano, obviously in Misano, the main drive into the track is the Giracato Avenue, or whatever it's called in Italian. So he's a big deal for anybody that doesn't know anything about the Giro, and to see his son waving the checkered flag, for me, that was a bit. Hang on a minute, I've got a bit of grit in my eye.
Who's chopping onions?
Yeah,
no, it was really nice. He had obviously the blue sort of Kato 74 t-shirt on as well. I thought that was lovely. Nice to see Noriyuki Haga in the pit lane as well. He's just been through some terrible personal tragedy as Haga, and it was really nice to see him in the paddock. And there were a lot more sort of familiar faces. For new fans that have sort of maybe not only watched MotoGP for the last 5 or 6 years. I mean, there used to just be the lower classes in particular, but even the 500cc. We were smothered in Japanese talent. I mean, it was literally, you'd always have in the 125s a Japanese rider contending for a win. There was so much talent. They're so passionate, about the sport still. They all attend Motegi. And then you think about the fans as well. And it's just something so charming about, Japanese races in general, and going there, because, it is a home, obviously, for Honda and for Yamaha. But I just love the Japanese fans. I mean, you would think, you go to certain circuits and they're supporting their home riders, and you get that. But you go to Japan and they will support the most obscure rider, and they'll be kitted out head to toe ready to give the riders gifts as well. I love it. It's brilliant.
Well, let me start that again. One rider who's going to hold Japan very close to his heart is David Alonso, winning that Moto3 World Championship on the weekend, and rightly so. I think he won 10 races this season. Phenomenal. Like, we're looking at the next Pedro Acosta, Marc Marquez, Valentino Rossi, right?
Well, Dorna have hashtagged him Baby Goat, haven't they? I mean, everywhere you look is the Baby Goat hashtag now for him. And I mean, the Colombian national anthem, I mean, I'd never bloody heard it until this year. And like you're saying, we've heard it 10 times so far this year. And it was good to see Jorge Martinez up on the podium as well. You know, Aspar himself, who's been pretty familiar with being up on the top step of the podium in the past. Jorge, team boss, up there to take some of the accolades at the weekend. Good sight, good thing.
David Alonso is the real deal. He has got absolutely everything that you could possibly want in a rider. He's supremely talented. First rider since Rossi to have as many points of this in the championship. I think he's 16 races in. He's 20 points off breaking a record from the lightweight class in terms of points outright as well. On and off the bike, he is sensational. He reminds me of Valentino when he first came into the 125s because he's got that charisma. There is no act with him. He's incredibly humble. He's grateful. He understands what's happened, the sacrifices people have made to get him there. He is a wonderful human being, and he will be loved by the fans and should be. He is the perfect role model for any kid that is watching racing and wants to follow in the footsteps of someone. He is brilliant with the media. He's just got absolutely everything. I love him. I think he's fantastic. I've got no doubt he will make his way into MotoGP in the next year or two. And I think he'll have a tremendous fan base just because he's so likeable. He's got some sort of weird celebrations. It was great to see him out on his little mini moto bike. You know, he started his career out with Aspar as well, which, like you say, that sort of nice touch to have Jorge Martinez Aspar up on the podium with him, because they have taken him from grassroots level all the way to the top. And I just think, yeah, brilliant. Really, really happy for him. He fully deserves it. Unstoppable. He's won 65% of the races, I think, this year. So, yeah, you can't argue with the stats there. He's brilliant.
Or the tag, Baby Goat.
I love it. Yeah, Baby Goat. He won't be baby for too long, though, will he?
I just love that. I think it was Marquez or maybe Marc Marquez or Jorge Martin said, it won't be long and he's going to be fighting with us in MotoGP. And you can just see, we saw Jorge, we saw Pecco, we saw Marc all high-fiving him on the way in. It, like you said, he just seems like such a genuine, nice human. It was really cool to see that collaboration.
I'll tell you one thing, Renita, they won't be high-fiving him in 5 years' time. I can assure you of that.
I was going to say, they were just laying the psychological ground, and they know what they've got to do. Better have friends with your enemies.
He is. I think you're right. He's another Pedro Acosta, another generational talent, but completely different in terms of the way they ride and different in personalities as well. I love Pedro Acosta. He is ruthless. And David is ruthless when the visor goes down, but not so much off screen. He's just quite a sweet young lad. Is David Alonso, very caring, very thoughtful about his processes, whereas Pedro is win at all costs, and I will let you know about it off the bike as well. Like, I wouldn't say he doesn't care about anyone, because obviously he does. He's a humble lad. He still lives in the fishing town that he grew up in and stuff like that, but they're completely different characters, which I think is quite cool, because they are going to be wrestling for MotoGP championships in the future without any doubt.
Oh, I love that so much. Well, Steve, I think we've taken up enough of your time talking about the Japanese Grand Prix. Thank you so much for joining us again on OMG MotoGP. Tell us, where are you off to next? Have you got BSB coming up?
Yeah, it's the last round of BSB this weekend at Brands Hatch. So I'm going there for this weekend, and it's proper showdown as ever. There's 3 in it to try and win. Kyle rides, Tommy Bridewell, Glenn Irwin. So looking forward to that. And then I'm off to the airport hotel on Sunday night, where I might have a beer to celebrate the end of the BSB season, and then flying to Australia on Monday, ready for the Australian Grand Prix. Looking forward to that. It's my first time back in Oz since pre-COVID. So It'll be nice to head out there and then going directly to Thailand. And then, I think I'm back in London for Malaysia. I'll be in Valencia. So, yeah, still a busy period coming up, and certainly a busy couple of weeks, but really looking forward to it.
Keith, were you hinting that you're going to be at the BSB just then by that
gesture?
Yeah,
100%. No, I always do the final one because nowadays, since I've got to a certain age where I don't have to worry about driving or any of those things, I just don't do it. I just join in with the festivities at the end of the day nowadays. It takes a little longer as well. When you're racing, and Steve will attest to this as well. When you're the racer, one bottle of Budweiser or some other weak beer would be enough to make you dizzy. Nowadays, I'm not a cheap date anymore. It takes a few more beers to get me on the pipe. But Sunday night should be quite. Jordan and Frank Bird are obviously kids of a friend of mine, Karen Atkins, now Lloyd, obviously, and Paul Bird, of course, who's no longer with us. And it's their first year managing the Hager Ducati team. And they have done a fantastic job. Len Irwin, obviously, their rider. And so I'll be joining them for, I think I'm doing some emceeing in the tent just to repay them for free food.
Oh, good. Well, I'll come and say hello to you. Yeah, I'm not going to join in on the festivities on the Sunday. I've deliberately booked myself a hotel at Heathrow Airport rather than staying in the paddock because, as you well know, Sunday nights at the Sunday night party at the end of the year, BSB, can get a little lively.
Well, how lucky you get to hang out with Keith this weekend, and then you get to hang out with me the following weekend in Australia.
Perfect. There we are. Yeah, looking forward to it.
Well, we'll have to get you back on to hear all about your racing past, because we had a few people in the comments on your previous time say we need to hear all about Steven and his racing journey. So we're definitely going to have you back on. But listeners, if you can't get enough of OMG MotoGP, then do check out our social channels at OMG MotoGP on all the platforms. Or if you have questions for our team, you can email us at omgmotogp@gmail.com. But we're going to be back soon with more OMG MotoGP. All right, I'm just going to keep this up. There's one person in the chat, and I don't know if it's Harry or if it's an actual guest who wants to have any questions answered. So, person, if you want,
Harry can't think of any decent questions, so probably not him.
So, if anybody here wants to ask Steve a question, can ask away. Otherwise, we will hit the big red button shortly.
I'll tell you what, you talk about being busy, Steve, at the minute. Harry is absolutely on it. He had to move out. He had a weekend off, but he's had to move out of his flat. So he's been moving furniture over the weekend, and we all know what that's bloody like. It's a nightmare.
Oh yeah, I know of Harry, and I've followed it. I follow him on Instagram. I can see how busy he is. So yeah, we were actually messaging the other day about our travels and how busy we are this year and stuff. So yeah, I mean, I am definitely ready for the end of the season. I think it's fair to say. I think that was my 25th race weekend just gone. So yeah.
How old are you now, Steve, if you don't mind me asking?
21.
The big 4-0, Keith.
Is that right? Bloody hell. Well, I mean, I'll swap places with you, no problem.
So guys, it's Anne. So Anne is back in the chat. Anne who's up the road from Keith. And if you have any questions for Steve or Keith, you can for sure ask away. I know it was originally 11. That is my fault. I take full blame for that. Daylight savings is throwing me out. I want to know who picked Jake to Gabe Wets or get wets. I also want to know who picked Jake to get wets. Keith, we're not sure on the answer of why Jake.
I know. What
Anne's
asking is whether Jake Dixon made the decision to run wets, or whether it was a team decision to run wets. It will have been the rider at the end of the day that made the ultimate decision. The problem is with Motegi, you can go around it and think you can look on the monitors and see what's gone on in Moto3. You can look out in pit lane and you can think, that's definitely wet weather, and then you go around on your sighting lap and think, oh shit, I may have made a bit of a mistake here. And then by the time you're on your warm-up lap and it's dried out even more, you know you've made the mistake. I mean, everybody that was on wets without any more rain knew they'd made a mistake. they didn't need their noses rubbing in it by everybody on slicks. But yeah, it will have been Jake that made the decision ultimately. I don't know, Steve. I used to be really bad at picking a tyre when the weather changed. I mean, back in the day, we had wets, intermediates, and slicks. Nowadays, we just go wets and slicks. But sometimes I either got to the grid and went, I'll have whatever he's got on next door, or I used to get my then girlfriend, mother of my oldest child, to pick. Because I was useless. So I just used to get her to say, am I running wets or slicks, darling?
Yeah, I honestly think that in that particular position, I mean, I wasn't in Japan, so it's difficult to kind of, sometimes you can have a feeling. I mean, I did speak to Neil about it. Neil said to me he would have 100% started the race with wets, given what he was looking at that particular moment. And they all went on a sighting lap. They all did an out lap as well. They did have a chance to change last minute. So I do think that the slicks were the gamble. Obviously, it paid off in the end, and it ended up being. But at the same time, if you were a rider, I'm surprised a few more didn't gamble for slicks. And I only say that because riders that don't have a say in the championship, it's one of those days where opportunity knocks, where you could get a good result, where you might be in the shop window at the moment looking for a ride next year. So I was genuinely surprised that only 6 riders opted for slicks at the start.
Well, particularly because Iogura, I mean, I alluded to it in our main chat a bit earlier on. I wasn't taking the mickey, but Iogura probably knows Motegi and Japanese weather fairly well, you would think. So you might just take a glance and think, Iogura, a man with a championship at stake, has just gone for slicks. That might just get your old brain thinking, maybe he knows something that I don't.
Yeah, true. Very true.
Who was the rider who came back in and started from pit lane? Who changed
that
from
was
slicks to wets?
Albert Arenas.
That's it. Yeah. Oh,
he made the ultimate blunder. He started on slicks and came in to change for wet. It couldn't have got any more. It couldn't have got any worse for him.
The ultimate blunder. A UB, as it's now known.
A UB. Oh my god. Well, and if you have any other questions, you can ask us. Otherwise, we should let Steve go. He's a busy man. We've taken up too much of his time. She's not in the chat. I can't.
You're all right. To be honest with you, all I'm going to be doing this afternoon is getting some sleep to try and get myself back into some sort of routine before Brands, and then just chill out until it's school pickup time. So
good to see you, Stevie. I'll see you at Brands next weekend.
Want an unparalleled Grand Prix experience and free signed MotoGP merchandise? MotoGP Premier has you covered. The first 15 people to buy any official ticket package will also receive an official piece of signed team merch. Just use code OMG at motogppremier.motogp.com/OMG at the checkout. Promotion ends 31st of October 2024.